Okay, so good morning everyone. We'll begin with the reflections on universal well-being. May I abide in well-being, in freedom from affliction, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may I maintain well-being in myself. May everyone abide in well-being, in freedom from hostility, in freedom from ill will, in freedom from anxiety, and may they maintain well-being in themselves. May all beings release from all suffering, and may they not be parted from the good fortune they have attained. When they act upon intention, all beings are the owners of their action and inherit its results. Their future is born from such action, companion to such action, and results will be their home. All actions with intention, be they skillful or harmful, of such acts they will be the heirs. So it'll be the final section of Acharya Mun's biography, where he's at the very last, you could say last stages of his life. But before I read it, I wanted to say maybe one lens we can apply to the writings of Acharya Mahaboowa. I don't know if people have heard this before, but sometimes they talk about this process of grieving, perhaps for our own death, when it comes time for us to go, or for that of a loved one, or maybe something we deeply care about, maybe a life that we once had but had to leave behind. There are different stages of grief, and it's sometimes given the acronym DABDA, D-A-B-D-A. And D, the first one, is denial, saying, this is not happening, not happening. So Acharya Mun's leaving, no, he can't leave, he's an arhat. He's really cultivated himself. He can't leave. And that's the first stage. Second stage, anger. How can he leave? Does the Buddha Dharma not work? I thought you're supposed to be completely free of birth and death. Well, that's a misunderstanding, but there's kind of anger, oftentimes. In a maybe more Christian setting, sometimes people are angry at God. Right? How can God take this person away from me? Maybe even angry at the person. How can they leave me at this time when I need so much of their support? Maybe even anger at oneself. How can I have spoken so badly to this person? It's kind of anger. And then there's a bargaining, is B. Bargaining is, maybe if I'd be willing to give up, my own life, if only they can continue to live. Right? There's a little bit of that as well in the writings about monks saying, please somehow take away some of my karma or my kind of lifespan, and I want to trade it in for Acharya Mun's long life. Bargaining. Or if I'll just be a good monk, please, maybe he can stay. We bargain with ourselves sometimes. Maybe I just do this and everything will be fine. Everything will be fine. If I just sacrifice myself a little bit, everything will be fine. Bargaining. Fourth stage, or fourth, you could say, way of responding, is depression. We go into this kind of withdrawal, things become heavy, lethargic. We just can't face life. Just the thought of losing someone we care about so much, the thought of losing Acharya Mun, for many of the monks and disciples, was just like, I don't know if I can continue to face life anymore. He was my anchor. He was my refuge. And the final stage is acceptance. It's when we accept, the nature of life is that there's old age, sickness, and death. This happens to everyone. Even the Buddha, even the Arhants, the sages, at some point their physical body will come to an end. This is just the truth. This is just the Dhamma, the nature of things. And so I wanted to read this last section with that lens in mind. So I will skip a little portion of it, but I'll sum it up. So Acharya Mun is being brought to Sakon Nakhon because he doesn't want to die in a small village. And so his disciples are kind of going about it very slowly. They're kind of taking their time. And Acharya Mun is actually rushing them, saying, I'm about to die. You better move more quickly because if I die where I am, it can cause a lot of suffering for other living beings. So it goes on and on. Finally, he gets to the place. And then it says, upon arrival, he was carried down from the truck and placed, still sleeping, in a hut at Wat Suda monastery. He remained asleep the entire day, not waking until about midnight. Within an hour of his waking, those critical symptoms of which he had repeatedly forewarned his seemingly deaf and blind disciples became more and more apparent, as if to say to us all, now do you see? This is why I kept insisting that you hurry to bring me to Sakon Nakhon. I want to quickly rid myself of this messy heap of suffering. The symptoms are fully obvious now. If you still don't understand, then take a look. If you don't believe what I was telling you, then watch carefully and consider with all your heart what you see appearing before you at this moment. Was I telling you the truth or not? Stop being so deaf, blind, and thoughtless from now on. Otherwise, you will never find the wisdom needed to save yourselves. What you are witnessing right now should inspire you to think deeply. Don't be complacent. Right? Denial, depression from the disciples. Acharya Mun saying, this is what I've been teaching you all this time. What are you guys doing? The 5 khandhas are indeed a heavy burden. In the very early hours of the morning, you begin to take leave of this heavy burden, this heap of intense suffering that no truly wise person wants to encounter again in the future. The monastery was absolutely quiet that night. No one milled around to disturb the stillness. Shortly, some important acharyas, like Chaokon Dhammachedi from Wat Patusampon monastery in Udon Thani, arrived at his hut, having come in great haste as soon as he heard the news. As they entered, they hurriedly sat down in a calm, composed manner, though their hearts were actually troubled by this obvious deterioration in his condition. It was a poignant reminder that he could pass away at any moment. Monks arriving to monitor his condition sat silently in 3 rows, facing him. Important senior disciples, led by Chaokon Dhammachedi, sat in front. The more junior monks and novices filled the remaining rows. All sat in complete silence, their eyes fixed on Acharya Mun. Their lower eyelids were moistened by tears they couldn't hold back. Such was the intensity of their despair. They knew all hope was lost, for nothing at all could be done to change the inevitable. They felt as if their own lives were losing all meaning. So the monks were sitting there, watching their beloved teacher pass away. At the beginning, Acharya Mun was lying on his right side in the lion's posture. Fearing this might exhaust him, some monks gently removed the pillow supporting him so that he may come to rest lying on his back. As soon as he became aware of this, he tried to shift back to his right side, but he no longer had the strength to move. As he struggled to turn on his side, some senior acharyas attempted to reposition the pillow so that again it supported his back. But noticing how very weak he was, they decided to stop, fearing that might make matters worse. Consequently, when Acharya Mun finally passed away, he lying neither on his back nor on his right side, but slightly propped up somewhere in between. It was simply impossible to adjust his posture further under the circumstances. His disciples, mostly monks and novices with a few lay people, sat in total despair as life slowly ebbed from his body. So apprehensive were they about his imminent death, they had almost forgotten to breathe. As the minutes passed, his breathing gradually became softer and more refined. No one took their eyes off him, for it was obvious that the end was fast approaching. His breathing continued to grow weaker and weaker. It was barely discernible. A few seconds later, it appeared to cease, but it ended so delicately that no one present could determine just when he passed away. His physical appearance revealed nothing abnormal, so different from the death of the ordinary person. Despite the fact that all his disciples observed his final moments with unblinking attention, not one of them was able to say with any conviction that this was precisely the moment when Acharya Mun finally took his leave of this dismal world. Seeing no apparent signs of life, Chao Kong Dhammachetty rather tentatively said, "I think he's passed away." He glanced at his watch. 2:23 a.m. So that was taken as the time of his death. When death has been confirmed, the impact of his passing was reflected in the grief-stricken, tearful faces of all the monks who sat crowded around his lifeless body. There followed anguished moments of low coughs and soft, incoherent mutterings before the whole room sank into a mood of silent despair, which is beyond the power of words to describe. Our hearts were plunged into unbearable feelings of emptiness. Our bodies sitting there appeared to be mere empty shells. Several long moments of still silence ensued when the whole world appeared to cease momentarily, while Acharya Mun abandoned his conventional existence and entered into the domain of ultimate happiness, where no vestige of conventional reality could disturb him ever again. I myself very nearly died of a broken heart along with him, as I sat by his side steeped in pensive sorrow. I could not manage to shake off this gloomy, somber mood that clouded my heart as he departed the world. I could do nothing to alleviate the extreme pain of the loss I felt. Living dead fittingly described my sense of hopelessness at that moment. After a period of silence, the senior disciples had the monks neatly rearrange his bedding. They laid out his body there for the time being with the understanding that next morning they would consult together about further arrangements. This accomplished, the monks began filing out the room. Though a few remained in the veranda outside the room, most of them went down below. Even though the whole area surrounding the hut was illuminated by brightly lit lanterns, his disciples stumbled around blindly in dejection, unsure where they were going. So he continues on with some comments about Acharya Mun's leaving. I'll read the very end about Ajahn Mun's reflections, because I think this is the transformation from grief and despair to self-reflection and resolve. And in this the teachings around grief in the world, in psychology, they say these different stages, the DABDA. It's not that one is wrong and one is right, but that we have to be able to accept whatever arises in our heart. And through that acceptance, we develop a kind of inner groundedness. So I just want to read what Acharya Mun says. I mean no disregard to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, but at that moment they seem somehow very distant, making it difficult to reestablish them as viable refuges. They did not appear to project the same affirmative presence that Acharya Mun did. He was always close at hand and ready to help resolve our doubts, provide us with inspiration, approaching him with pressing problems that we were unable to solve on our own. These same burning issues invariably dissolved away the moment he offered a solution. This salient recollection, so deeply engraved on my heart, profoundly affected me when he passed away. I could think of no other person capable of helping me solve my problems. Who else could I find with such compassion for me? Whose else advice could I trust? I was afraid of being left alone, depressed, and hopelessly stuck with my own store of ignorance. Gone were the easy solutions I had found while living with him. The more I thought about this dilemma, the more discouraged I became about finding a safe, painless way out of my own. To my ignorance, I saw no way forward at that moment. Only misery and despair stared at me. Sitting there in front of his dead body, as though I myself were dead, I could think of no way to save myself and relieve my misery. I sat brooding, a living, breathing ghost, completely oblivious to time. This was the first time in my life as a monk I felt so gloomy, frightened, and confused. There is no one to help me, no means of extricating myself from this distress. Each time I glanced down at Acharya Mun's lifeless body, tears welled up in my eyes and flowed down my cheeks. I was helpless to stop them. My chest heaved and sobbed as an uncontrollable emotion arose and lodged in my throat, nearly suffocating me. Eventually, I regained enough presence of mind to reflect inwardly, admonishing myself. Do I really intend to die of a broken heart right now? He died free of concerns and attachments, which are the matters of the kleshas. If I were to die now, I would die as a result of my concerns and attachments. That would be harmful to me. Neither my despondency nor my death is of any use to me or Acharya Mun. When he was alive, he never taught us to miss him to the point of death. This kind of longing is the way of worldly people. Even though my reason for missing him is associated with Dhamma, it is contaminated by worldly concerns and is hardly worthy of a Buddhist monk. Such thoughts are especially inappropriate for someone like me who has set his sights firmly on achieving the highest level of Dhamma. The Lord Buddha stated that whoever practices the Dhamma properly is in fact worshipping the Buddha, that whoever realizes the Buddha as well. It is clear that my longing is not in perfect accord with Dhamma. To be perfect accord with Dhamma, I must practice precisely what Acharya Mun taught me. This is the correct way for me to show how much I miss him. Should I die while engaged in those harsh training methods that he recommended, I shall feel confident that my death is in harmony with the principles of Dhamma. This is the only sensible way to behave. I must not obstruct my own progress by longing for him in an unreasonable worldly manner. I'll only harm myself. In this way I regain mindfulness, allowing reason a chance to intervene and forestall the maelstrom raging in my heart at the time, and so I avoided being buried alive in my own futility. So taking Acharya Mun's passing away as a catalyst, as a spur for his own practice. So clearly Acharya Mun's not here with us embodied now, as same as Master Hua, but we can still take that same spirit of urging ourselves on to practice. Okay, so let's do 3 steps, 1 bow.